All right, started the recording. So the seminar now starts. Welcome to the seminar, and you can start introducing Erin.
Okay, thank you everybody for attending. We have a slightly different format for our seminar series today. I have invited 3 of our colleagues and collaborators within our pest management industry to talk today about perspectives of entomologists in industry, or people who work with entomologists. They're not all entomologists. So we have a lot of seminar speakers who come and talk about, and our students get exposed to a variety of positions within academia. But I think it's really important for our students and our postdocs to understand, to hear from colleagues in other positions. Specifically, this is the insecticide or crop management or pest management industry. And so we've invited 3 speakers today with the goal of kind of describing what they do, but also what skills they think are important for them as they started in these careers. So we have 3 speakers. First is Dr. Erin Hichner. She is the Research and Development Specialist at Syngenta, just Syngenta Crop Protection, I think it is. Erin got her bachelor's degree at Rutgers here, and her PhD at Virginia Tech. Our next speaker will be Greg Rogers, who is the Field Development Manager at Certis USA. He got his bachelor's and master's in plant sciences from the University of Delaware. He started his career at DuPont and then transitioned to Certis USA in the past 5 years or so. And then finally, we have Rick Cooper, who is a graduate of our department here. He's the Senior Director of Specialty Services at Terminix. He also got his bachelor's degree at University of Delaware, then did his master's at Rutgers, took a little bit of a break to work for Cooper Pest Management, and then came back here to do his PhD with Cheng-Li Wang here at Rutgers a few years ago. So they're going to all kind of alternate their talks. And then if you can just hold all of your questions for all of them until the end so that we can make sure we stay on time. So Erin, go ahead.
Okay, thank you for that introduction and good morning, everyone. It's very exciting for me to be here today, especially because, as Ann mentioned, I have a lot of roots at Rutgers. And so it's great to be able to come back and to talk to you a little bit about my job working in industry and the path I took to get here. And that's where I'll start about my own personal journey. I grew up on a vegetable farm in southern New Jersey. I was one of 6 children, potato farm, but also other vegetable crops. My sister now has continued the tradition. She's a 6th generation farmer now running our vegetable farm here in the southern part of the states. I attended Rutgers University, received my bachelor degrees. I majored in biology and minored in entomology. I had a number of classes with George, so a lot of positive experiences there. And during that time, during the summers, I discovered that Rutgers had a research center in Bridgeton. This is the site that Ann works at. And I was able to get a job there working during the summers. And that was really a pivotal moment in terms of my career, because I really wasn't aware of these faculty type of positions, conducting research in the field, having grown up on a farm and have spent a lot of time out in the field. To me, it was amazing that you could have a career doing that type of work. So something I was really passionate about. So it kind of planted the seed for my future career endeavors. So I worked there during the summers. And when I graduated from Rutgers, they had an opening with the IR4 program. And if you aren't familiar with it, it's a really good program that works to provide minor use pesticide registrations for growers. Working in industry, it's a very expensive and time-consuming process to register crop protection products. It's probably between $300 and $500 million to bring a product to the market. It's a 10 to 15-year development process, so very expensive. We have a huge investment in it, and as a company, we obviously want to register those products on the largest acre crops that we can. You know, things like corn and soybean and cotton, just to be able to get the money recouped back that we have spent. So sometimes the minor crops get forgotten and left behind. So the IR4 program works to get registrations on those minor crops, so growers have options. So I spent a number of years working as an IR4 field researcher at the Rutgers station, mainly getting crop tolerance and residue data for those minor use registrations. And then I decided to return to graduate school. Entomology was obviously the area I was most interested in based on my experience at Rutgers and growing up on a farm. And so I worked with Tom Kuhar at Virginia Tech. That's a picture of us with our lab group at the research station on the Eastern Shore. So in terms of graduate school, I worked with a Colorado potato beetle. So it kind of came full circle in terms of growing up on a potato farm and getting the opportunity to work with that beetle during my PhD. I looked at host plant preference. I developed some semiochemical based strategies. We were working with an aggregation pheromone. And I also was looking at a novel insecticide for control of the Colorado potato beetle. So sort of a multidisciplinary approach to controlling and managing this insect pest. And from there, I ended up working for Syngenta. And originally, I sort of wanted to go the academic routes, and that was my main priority. But I was fortunate that Tom Cooher was very generous with all of his graduate students. Whenever he had industry reps come into town, he would always include us at lunch or dinners and meetings with them. So we really got an opportunity to get to know some of these individuals. And through that, someone reached out to me about a job opportunity in the Mid-Atlantic region. And I was hesitant to even go on the job interview because it wasn't something I was interested in, but it was January and it was cold in the Northeast and they were going to fly me to Florida and everyone's like, oh, just go. It'll be a great experience. They'll kind of wine and dine you and it'll be a fun opportunity and really good interviewing experience. So I went and I guess you could say the rest is history. They offered me the job shortly thereafter and I took it and it was one of the best decisions I made because for me, in terms of my interest in research and being in the field, working in industry has just really meshed well with my personality and my my passion in terms of entomology and agriculture. So as Ann mentioned, I'm the field scientist with Syngenta. I cover the Mid-Atlantic region. And although my background's in entomology, many times in industry, we are also working with, pathogens. I do nematode work. I do weed science, looking at traits as well as seed treatment. So it's a large variety of areas that you're researching. And I will say when I first started, it was a little frustrating considering that I'd spent 4 years focusing on entomology and then I'm plopped into a territory where I'm expected to do, corn herbicide trials. But I will have to say over the years, it's probably one of the most motivating and passionate things that I've discovered about being in this position because I'm not a pathologist, but it's a challenge for me to learn about pathology. And I really appreciate the opportunity to learn how to manage Fusarium head blight in wheat or other insect pests, working with nematodes. And it kind of, it never gets old because there's always something new and different and something that I really do appreciate about my job, even though my background really is entomology based. So in this role, I do a number of internal research trials. I have a site in New Jersey, and I also have a field site in Maryland where I conduct these trials. So I really focus looking at early stage products and developing them. And kind of part of our development process, as they get closer to being launched commercially, it's really important for us to test these with university cooperators, mainly because they're dealing with growers. They're kind of our unbiased contact information for growers because they're testing competitors' information or competitors' products. And then they're giving this information to growers. So if grower wants to know how to control a certain pest in a crop, these university cooperators are testing a variety of products and can provide information and insight. So in addition to doing my internal trials, I also coordinate trials with all the universities in the Mid-Atlantic region. So I established trials at Penn State and Rutgers, University of Delaware, University of Maryland, Virginia Tech, as well as West Virginia. And that's another aspect of my job that I really appreciate is that I get to work with a number of faculty from a variety of disciplines and the relationships and the working environment that I have with them, I think is a really rewarding experience. And I will also say the Mid-Atlantic region is great because we have such awesome crop diversity. It's from wheat and field corn all the way to cranberries and blueberries, as well as tree fruit. So it never gets old in terms of the variety of crops and pests that I'm able to work on in this position. I wanted to sort of comment about the skills that I think are necessary to work in industry based on my experience of working in industry. I think the first thing is applied knowledge and research skills. And when I say applied knowledge, it doesn't necessarily have to be field research. I know scientists that have been hired that have no field experience whatsoever. And I think what's important in terms of knowledge is being able to conduct scientific studies, and that's being able to understand how to initiate trials, how to develop protocols and objectives, how to establish these trials, then collect the data and to analyze the data and summarize it. And I think you can be successful in an industry job even if you don't necessarily have the field experience. I think it's an added bonus and advantage, but I don't think it's necessary. I think just having a good, basic, solid foundation in terms of research is a really important skill to work in industry. Non-technical skills are really important too. And when I say non-technical skills, I think it's really just having an initiative, kind of being able to be creative and think outside the box, because a lot of times we're put to task on certain things that I'm not exactly sure how to solve the problem. So you sort of have to be able to think along those lines. I think you have to be organized, really a self-starter and self-motivated. You know, I work independently. In some ways, it's like I'm my own boss. I don't have anyone that I report to. I don't go to an office. You know, I am personally responsible for getting up every morning and doing what I need to do. So you really have to be able to work independently and function in that level when it comes to working in industry. Leadership skills are obviously very important. There are plenty of opportunities where you need to step up to the plate, either leading a team or leading, you know, a trial establishment in terms of developing a protocol for some particular pest or problem. You know, and I think there's lots of opportunities to get these skills while you are in graduate school. You know, if you have the opportunity to, you know, work with a department club or become an officer at a department club. You know, I was part of a larger lab group. I think there's plenty of opportunities when I was in grad school to kind of take on that leadership role and step up to the plate and help out with other people's projects. You know, if you have the opportunity to be a part of an ESA committee or to organize a symposium, those are all great opportunities to really hone in those leadership skills. And it's something to keep in mind as you're working towards, you know, whatever profession you plan to go into. Teamwork is also essential. You know, there's a lot of collaborative effort, and it's not just within Syngenta. I mean, I am part of a lot of teams in Syngenta, but I'm also working outside of Syngenta with university cooperators. You know, they may be collaborating together on projects, and I'm supplying things for those projects. I think I'm also working at field sites where I'm working with a farm crew or farm staff. So it's important to be able to communicate and work with them as a team. And that kind of brings me into my next thing, which is communication skills. I think it's really important to have skills where you can communicate to any group of individuals. It's not uncommon for me to make a presentation at, you know, an entomology meeting or another scientific meeting, but then to also be standing in a cornfield and talking with growers about crop protection. So being able to communicate across a variety of individuals with different backgrounds, I think is really important. And I think this is easily achieved while you're in grad school if you have the opportunity to, you know, obviously make presentations at professional meetings. But if you can, you know, when I was in grad school, we were always required to give a research update at the grower meetings at our site. So that was really a great experience. You know, my major professor also had us do master gardener presentations, and that was a great learning experience. The questions they asked during some of those things really keeps you on your toes. So just being able to communicate across a broad, you know, range of individuals, I think is very important. And the last thing is flexibility. I will say with industry likes change, and that's the one constant that I think I can depend on for my job is change. You know, we're always looking ways to improve things, whether it's just how we function as a company, to all the technology. So being flexible, being able to change things quickly, and having that kind of mobility, I think is really important. One thing I wanted to touch on too is in terms of interview process. You know, when I was interviewing, it was a behavioral interview, and I'm not sure how commonly this is used nowadays, but it was something that I really wasn't aware of until I went on my interview. And so I was kind of like, maybe not so prepared for it, but in hindsight, I think it's a good way to really gauge someone's kind of personality and how they handle difficult situations. So it's kind of just questions of tell me a time when, or kind of describe a situation that, you know, where you maybe had a disagreement with another fellow grad student, or, you know, things along those lines, just to kind of gauge how you handle those situations and how competent you are to face some of the adverse things that you probably will face in your position. And kind of just to wrap it up, you know, the benefits of working in industry. You know, I'm a mother of 3 daughters, and so it's fun that I'm able to bring them to work with me and actually put them to work at this point. You know, at the bottom picture, I had my kids come out and help me harvest a butternut squash. I figure that was they were virtual learning then, so that kind of counted as our math experiment for the day, counting and weighing squash. But just having the flexibility, as I mentioned, I pretty much work from home, and So one thing I really truly love about my position is that I can make my own schedule. And if I need to be somewhere with my children, I have that flexibility and I can do it. And it's been a very conducive environment in terms of having kids and managing and juggling the balance stuff that has to go on with having a career. And the other thing too, the bottom right picture is me at a cranberry field in New Jersey. Cesar will appreciate that. That's kind of in his backyard, but there's a lot of opportunities to see cool stuff like that. And having a background in agriculture and a passion for agriculture and entomology and all the other disciplines, it's very rewarding to be able to experience things like that and be able to get out and see different things in my role. So that's all I have. I think it's Greg next, and I think we're going to hold questions till the end. Do you want me just to keep going on to the next slide?
And are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Continue, I guess.
Okay, so Greg, I'm going to put your slide up.
All right, thank you.
Uh-huh.
So I don't have quite as fancy a presentation as Erin. So a little bit about my background. I actually grew up in a lobstering town in Maine. And I came to school planning on doing marine biology because I just wanted to play in the water all the time, and kind of came in agricultural kind of sideways. Discovered I like plant physiology, and as Ann said, I am not an entomologist. I'm a plant physiologist, horticulturalist, I guess is kind of my background. When I finished up at UD with my master's, I stuck around for 3 years and did a bunch of soil science research in the Delmarva before I went to DuPont. So sort of a broad background, right? Not just kind of a single expertise, if you will. I started out more as kind of a lab guy at DuPont, doing membrane transport work and a lot of microscopy, and then eventually kind of transitioned back into agriculture again, right? I mean, we work with agrochemicals in my technical role, but it was good to get back after a couple seasons at DuPont into a role where I was dealing again with growers and farms and such like that. Interesting. So I think one of the things that differs between some people's background and mine is that I have kind of come into agriculture sideways. I have kind of come into my role as a field development manager from a different area. So I ran the tech service desk at DuPont for 3 years, which if anyone's ever heard of that, I basically answered all the questions from all the US on all the products at DuPont for 3 years. And that was a great way to learn products. But I heard someone say this morning in a different meeting that until you pour some product out, you don't really know how it works. And so I transitioned from that role to be a field development manager for the Northeast. That would have been New York, New Jersey, and New England. I'm dating myself, but that was before Ann's time at Rutgers, so I never got to actually work with her until this role. Did that for about 5 years, and then went into a global data management role, which was sort of a bit of a change because I was, at a desk, so to speak, but I was working with a diverse global group of people on our data management systems, but also on an effort to improve our research quality, our data quality coming from the field. And that was a great opportunity to kind of explore a different part of the industry, see the industry from a lot of different perspectives as I traveled all over the world to work with people. So a great opportunity. And I think that's a part of what makes a big company like a Syngenta or a BASF or one of those sort of an interesting option, because you don't have to just go to the field. You could start out somewhere else. Erin has a colleague now at Syngenta who is a good friend of mine that spent 5 years as a discovery biologist at DuPont. He's a fungicide. So he's Erin's pathologist, I guess, right? Craig Austin. But he spent 5 years basically doing greenhouse and lab work before transitioning over to Syngenta to do some technical service work. And that's actually something I think, Erin, maybe you can step back into this. In both my field roles as field development rep for DuPont and here at Certis, we pretty much do soup to nuts. So I get a product when it's got a CX or a DPX code on it. So it's a brand new product. We don't really know a lot about it. And I carry it all the way to launch. And then I also support products. So Certis has some VTs, which are 50 years old that I still support, insecticides. And I think that's a different role than you guys work at Syngenta, right, Erin?
Yeah, it is. And And I think you bring a valuable point that I didn't mention, is that I think with industry, there's a lot of sub opportunity in terms of roles that you can take. You know, I've been a field scientist the entire time I've been with Syngenta, but there's always opportunities if you want to go to like a global product lead, or if you are interested in regulatory, or more of the commercial side of the business. And yeah, depending on the company and depending on the kind of infrastructure of that company, it varies. But the one thing I've noticed is that there's plenty of opportunities to, once you are working for that company, to kind of switch to a different role. And if there's something that's more interesting to you in terms of maybe you want to be more on the sales side of it or the commercial side of it, I think those opportunities are out there, and there's a lot of flexibility and options, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Excellent. So that's kind of my background. I will say, out of all the jobs I've had, field rep is the best job by far. So Erin, you made the right choice.
I agree. I know. I see a lot of people like climb the corporate ladder and then come right back down to field scientists. So
usually once someone gets a job like this, they stay in it. Yeah. So the interesting thing for me now is that I've transitioned from DuPont, which used to be a big crop protection, conventional crop protection company, and I now work for a much smaller company, Certis, which is one of the larger biopesticide companies, but biopesticides aren't quite as large as conventional. So it's been a whole new look on how products are used and how we interface with people, and it's been really exciting to kind of move through the industry and see everything from the ground truth as a soil scientist back at Delaware, to a field development rep in a conventional place, conventional product line, to a global person, and now back to a field rep as a biopesticide person. So a great lot of experience available out there. And again, you don't have to pigeonhole yourself anywhere. You can move around and get lots of cool experience. So Erin did a good job covering a lot of the information, kind of like what you need as a background. I know I'll reference Craig again. He would interview people at DuPont for jobs. He'd come into my office afterwards and flop into the guest chair and be like, they did a great presentation. They were really, really smart. And then I asked them to design a simple greenhouse experiment, and they were like deer in the headlights. They couldn't do it, right? And so, for a role like ours, and even, like his as a discovery biologist back at the greenhouse, understanding how to design an experiment and have positive and negative controls and all that kind of stuff, which seems like, that it's just what we do, that's something that you don't always get at a university, level. You guys are often excellent entomologists or molecular biologists, but sometimes the getting your hands dirty part you miss out on. So when you get an opportunity, like when Ann goes out to the field, go with her, enjoy it, check it out. The other thing I think Erin mentioned was communication and leadership, and a lot of times you have to lead someone far senior to you to the right answer when you're in meetings. And yeah, I see Erin smiling. When you come in with the field data and it's their baby project, and they're like, no, this project's going to go here. You're like, well, this is how it actually works, and this is where it really fits. And you have to have a lot of felt leadership, not just authority, if you will. And flexibility. One of the biggest things I learned when I came to the field was you've got to be willing to be flexible, but you've got to be willing to say, you know what, I don't know, let me get back to you, right? Because again, I'm a plant physiologist, not an entomologist. I go ask my boss about entomology questions. Erin, you need to ask someone about pathology sometimes, right? And it's perfectly reasonable to say, hey, you know what, I'm not sure, let me check. So yeah. But yeah, in general, it's a great opportunity. Industries are definitely different from academia. Like I said, I worked at the University of Delaware for 3 years. And was in and out of it for a while. So it's a great experience, and academia is awesome, but this is another opportunity to use your skills to help agriculture. So. I'm happy to cede the floor.
Okay, I'll go to the next slide then.
All right.
Okay, so Erin, I guess you're going to forward the slides. I'll just let you know when. Yep. Okay, sounds good. Okay, hi. My name is Rick Cooper. So I'm going to be coming from a totally different perspective than both Erin and Greg. They're on the manufacturing side of the equation, research, development, manufacturing, bringing products to market. And I am on the applied end of the spectrum, where we're using a lot of the products that are made by the Syngentas and the BASFs and the DuPonts of the world. So there's a lot going on my slide here. I spent a lot of time at Rutgers, as well as within the industry. I can really date myself. I was doing my master's when Dr. Hamilton was doing his PhD. And most of the faculty that was there at the time, I think short of Dr. Hamilton and who else? Lena, right? Lena Braston. I don't know that there's anybody else that's there at this point. And now I'm back at Rutgers also. I have a role in Dr. Wong's lab, but I have German cockroach on the left, carpenter ant in the middle, and bed bugs on the right. I've spent the better part of my life studying these three different pests at various parts during various parts of my career. And I've had the opportunity to study them both academically and also on the applied end of the spectrum. So my background, similar to Erin, I kind of grew up in within the industry that I ended up. My family had a pest management company. And so I literally grew up as a teenager learning pest control. But that was back in the 70s. Things were quite different then. There was, really not much of a regulatory agency to speak of. The regulatory agencies were young and just really, coming into their own. The chemicals were a lot more toxic back then, and we didn't really rely much on science. So really, we relied strictly on what the chemicals could do for us. But and quite honestly, it was those years as a teenager that I had a love for entomology. My father was an entomologist. He was a medical entomologist in the Korean War. And I knew I loved entomology, but I didn't necessarily think I would ever end up being involved in the family business or in the pest management industry for that matter. And it was largely because of the way the industry was at that time. I went off to school. I did my bachelor's degree, similar to Greg. I did my degree at Delaware. So I got my bachelor's at University of Delaware, and it was a great experience. And like Erin, I took advantage of a lot of opportunities, which helped shape, I guess, my decision-making in terms of career. So I worked for the USDA Beneficial Insect Research Lab while I was down there for a couple of years. Gave me a real great appreciation for the things that the USDA did. I loved the job, but there were certain aspects of working for the federal government that just didn't quite sit with me. Then I moved over to DuPont, and I did a lot of work with field testing of herbicides, fungicides, and insecticides. And their field entomologist really took me under his wing, and I got to do a lot more entomology-specific projects as well. So I got a little bit of taste for what it might be like to work with a large industry, a big manufacturer like Erin and Greg had worked with. And then, another branch within the structural pest management industry is the military, because all the armed forces have structural entomologists or public health entomologists on staff. And that was a route that I almost took. I was very, very close to becoming a civilian entomologist for the Navy. But my brother was back at our family business in the 80s, and he kind of lured me back into at least considering coming back to our company, because he was talking to me about urban integrated pest management. And this was in the very early 80s. IPM, obviously an agricultural concept, was something that was very new in the urban environment, and has its challenges in the urban environment. And he was really looking to take the company in a much more progressive direction, a more scientifically based direction. and just asked me to give it a shot. So I did come back for a couple of years, and I ran a route as a technician. I think that that's probably one of the most important things that I can say is just doing the groundwork that everybody else does. It's very difficult to come in as a technical person if you don't understand what basically the technicians are going through on a day-to-day basis. So I was no different than anyone else. I ran a pest control route for a couple of years. And I was really impressed with where the company was heading. But I wanted to further my education. So I left the family business and went to Rutgers to do my master's degree. And there I worked with Dr. Kobe Schall, who is now has a endowed chair at NC State, and hence the cockroach on the left. When I was doing my master's, I did a lot of very basic science. We asked very basic questions. I studied the effects of nutrition on development and reproduction in German cockroaches, and it wasn't really applied work, but it ended up, the research that we did in Kobe's lab ended up really shaping a lot of the future development of bait products and the use of insect growth regulators in conjunction with baits and other things. So I really gained an appreciation for basic science. And that's something that's been invaluable for me. So following my master's degree, I came back into the industry. I came back to the family business. And I really, what I learned as a grad student is really what propelled me in my career. I was able to take that information and I was able to create a unique kind of niche in the industry. So I guess if you can switch slides, Erin. So, I've been weaving my whole career has really been spent on both sides of the fence, on the academic and the applied side. Like I said, I was, an entomologist as an undergrad, ran a route for a couple of years, went back and got my master's degree, came into the industry for 20 years and really kind of built my career within the pest management industry, but really never leaving my ties to academia. And I've spent my entire life on both sides of the fence. Which is, I think, unique, but I think it's something where there's an opportunity to be able to do that within the pest management industry. And so this is a quote that came from, it was actually the Syngenta Crown Leadership Awards, Erin. So, but there was a quote during that awards ceremony, and they basically described me as saying, Richard moves comfortably between science and industry, using scientific research to create replicable pest management strategies and to educate others in the industry in a way that resonates and creates a level of understanding that cements the concepts being conveyed. That's pretty much been my life. It's something that the reason I share that with you is I think that we're seeing more and more young entomologists coming into the field of structural pest management. And it's this type of integrating science and industry that I think is going to continue to move the pest management industry forward. And to me, it's been remarkable to watch the pest management industry grow from that largely unregulated, chemically dependent industry that I knew as a teenager to the industry that it is today. I think when people think about pest control, most people don't aspire to be the bug guy. They don't aspire to be, the quote, exterminator. And there's that stereotypical image of, in pest control of someone walking around with a compressed air sprayer. But pest management is much more of a science than people realize. And if you do structural pest control correctly, it's completely founded in the science of entomology, and it's applicable at all times. So, when you think of pest management, it's an amazing career. You get to see things that no one else would ever see. pest management takes you into virtually every facet of society. It's not just controlling nuisance ants in someone's kitchen who has zero tolerance for pests, but we protect literally every aspect of the supply chain. There's virtually nothing that you can purchase or bring into your home that isn't protected somewhere along the way by structural pest management. And a lot of the protection that we provide has great significance. Anything from protecting structures from wood destroying insects like termites and carpenter ants to protecting our food supply chain. From the moment raw agricultural products are harvested, they're vulnerable to damage or contamination by pests all along the way, from post-harvest storage to post-harvest transportation, to the manufacturing process, to the packaging process, and to the delivery to the store shelf. The same thing is true for all of our pharmaceuticals, surgical implants, sterile surgical supplies, pharmaceutical production. We protect buildings and we have a public health role as well, dealing with insects that cross over to the vector side. We deal with mosquitoes at times and ticks and bed bugs and cockroaches, and these are pests that either are direct vectors or they produce allergens or quality of life. Hopefully you've never dealt with a bed bug problem, but it's certainly impacts quality of life. So to me, it's been an awesome, amazing career because I've been able to practice the science of entomology, both academically as well as on the applied side of the spectrum. I've maintained relationships with manufacturers, in companies, like where Erin and Greg work. I've been able to do a lot of field research while working on the pest management side of the equation. So in the years that I was away from Rutgers, I was doing a lot of field efficacy research. Erin talked about how she has relationships with all the universities doing field trials. Well, we did also a lot of contract research for manufacturers out in the field doing field efficacy work. I've also had the opportunity to educate, not only within my own company, but to educate an industry. And that's given me the opportunity to travel all around the country, giving presentations both at scientific meetings and industry meetings, and also to do a lot of writing for, again, the scientific journals, but also writing for trade journals, writing chapters, and even publishing books. So, it's really been very fulfilling. You can go to the next slide. So in terms of skills, I think Erin did an amazing job talking about the skill sets. And I think those skills pretty much are going to overlap largely with what it takes in our end of the business as well. But I really think the communication skills, and Erin, I thought, handled this well. But to me, I think this is one of the most important skills that you can have. The ability to take scientific information and to be able to distill it and convey that information to people in a way that it does resonate, in a way that is meaningful, to be able to, not only speak at a scientific meeting, but as Erin said, talk to the grower. We're talking to pest management technicians. You have to be able to talk to people with all different kinds of educational levels. So that's a real critical skill. You can go to the next. Teaching. If you're involved in the pest management industry as an entomologist, and you're clearly going to be in a role that has to do with training and education, developing new programs and products, and possibly some research and development, and you need the ability to teach. So obviously that relies on your communication skills, but also the ability to develop and deliver training materials. And this is, I think, where TAing is a great opportunity as a grad student to start developing those skills, or getting involved in helping to create course content. Test writing skills, I think, are one of the most difficult skill sets out there, to write a good test question. that is very clear and not ambiguous or confusing. So being able to teach, develop these training programs, and then to be able to deliver them. Okay, next. Developing replicable pest management programs. I can't tell you how much I've relied on my scientific training to develop pest management programs, but then to be able to take those programs and make sure that they are also economically practical, that they're profitable, and that you can replicate them and teach, people that aren't entomologists how to deliver them. So that's a big part of what we do. Okay, next. Field evaluation, potentially, Greg talked about the importance of being able to design experiments and to analyze and summarize data. So depending on the kind of company that you work with, especially if you're working with some of the larger firms or even a smaller firm that's very progressive, you may have the opportunity to do field evaluation of products similar to like what I had the opportunity to do. And the ability then to design and implement becomes important. Okay, next. And then again, lab bioassays, probably not, but depending again on the company that you work for, some companies like Orkin, some of these really large companies, they literally have research and development centers. And so there could be the opportunity to do either behavioral assays, resistance assays, things of that nature. So having some of that background, again, not really critical, but it could be useful. And then this isn't a skill, this is a trait, but humility. And I think both Erin and Greg, touched on this a little bit. When you get into the pest management industry, you find out very quickly that what you learn in the classroom and the lab, it doesn't necessarily translate to what we see in the field. And my 2 years, well, it was a lot more than 2 years because I grew up, doing pest management in the summers for a number of years and then had 2 solid years running a route. There was nothing that could replace that field experience. And we see a lot of young people coming in, especially with degrees and as scientists who think they know a lot more than maybe what they do. And so I think that, there's nothing more important than having humility. And I know Greg touched on, if you don't know the answer, that, that's fine. Just because you're the entomologist, you're the scientist, doesn't mean you have to have all the answers. And so I think that's important. Okay. And so I would just say, and Erin touched on a lot of these, and so I'll wrap up. We're going to, we have to, I think I have a minute or two, but you really want to get yourself out there. And again, I'm going to just kind of echo some of the things that Erin said, but, get involved, in ESA, the MOVE section, which, is the urban veterinary, and why am I blanking?
Veterinary.
What's that? Medical, urban, and vet. And then there's also a smaller, you're probably less familiar, but there's a national conference on urban entomology, and these are great meetings to be able to get out and speak at within the field of urban entomology. NCUE really is kind of a bridge between the academic and the applied industry. Pai Chi Omega is another bridge, which most people probably are not familiar with, but this is basically a urban entomology fraternity that is really the like I said, creates a great bridge between the academic community and the applied industry. And there's a lot of opportunities, not only for networking here, but for scholarships, both within the ESA at NCUE, as well as Pai Chi Omega. Okay, you can go to the next. Developing relationships, one of the great things you can try and do is to write for trade journals. In the pest industry, we have PCT and Pest Management Professional magazines. I've written for other stakeholder groups, for the multifamily housing industry. If you're a stored product entomologist, food processing and manufacturing, building maintenance, there's all kinds of trade journals, all different kinds of stakeholder groups. that you can write articles for. And this is a really great way to get your face out there, your name out there, and what you do. Okay, and the next. Industry supported research is another great opportunity. And, you know, Greg talked about how Tom Kuhar would involve them with all the various collaborators. This is a real good opportunity. If you have the ability to carry out industry supported research, this is something that Dr. Wong does an awful lot of with his students. It's a great way to really develop those relationships with manufacturers and other entities that could potentially be future job paths. And the last thing is, you know, internships or part-time employment, and probably not so much for grad students because you don't have the time for this. But if there are any undergraduate students that are watching the seminar, I think, you know, any kind of internships or part-time work that you can get in the field is going to be really useful. And that's all I have. So I think we're going to open things up for questions, right, Anne and Shangla?
Yes. Yes, thanks.
Yeah, great job
Thanks,
staying on
everybody.
time, everybody.
Yes. So everybody can ask for questions to any one of those, the three speakers.
Hi, I had a question. Erin, my question was for you. So I work for Dr. Ann Nielsen at Rarick. I've seen you in passing, but I don't think we've ever like formally met. But so one of my questions for you was if you could elaborate a little bit more as to what kind of research that you do and like your level of freedom as to what it is. Because when I think of industry, I think of a lot of the field research that you're doing is like insecticide trials. Is that along that way, or do you have a lot of freedom? Can you choose like what you want to work with, what kind of applications?
Well, I mean, it is a pest, pest control company. So it is, yes, obviously insecticide related. I also work with fungicides, herbicides, nematicides. So that is the main goal of our company. So that is the majority of my work. I mean, there's a flexibility in terms of, you know, if we have a project we're trying to develop and we're not sure how it works, I've done bioassays before. I've looked at some different pests in terms of control, but it is obviously narrowly kind of oriented towards developing products for crop protection.
Okay. I also had a question in regards to like the comparison.
Greg, do you want to address that too in terms of your role with the same type of questions?
Yeah, no, I think Erin's right. You know, we are bound by the need to make whatever we work on profitable in the end. So unfortunately, it does narrow our ability to just goof around and do what we want to do. But and like she said, there's enough variation in what we work on, the products and the diseases and the insects, that it doesn't really get boring. So, you know, take your discretionary time to play, right?
Yeah. I had like another question along the same lines as to if you guys could like talk about a little about the differences between like academia research and industry research in terms of like, I kind of see it as you guys have a lot more freedom because you don't have to apply for necessarily like grants and stuff versus when academia is very reliant on doing those things. And like, what is your guys' like perspective about like the level of freedom that is, or maybe the more restricting version of that?
I think it's how you want to spend your time. I mean, for me, I am very appreciative that I don't have to apply for grants and it's dependent on funding. You know, I have a corporate credit card with a very high spending limit. So money, not that it's not an object, but it's not so much of a limiting factor for us. So I'm able to focus on actually doing my job, doing the research. I don't have to worry about that aspect of it. You know, and it depends where your interests lie. You know, if you'd rather, you know, be in an office working on a manuscript and writing grants to get funding, and that's, you know, your motivation, you know, I mean, academia, I think, is a better route. You know, for me, I just really love being in the field and love the applied research aspect of it. That's my passion, and that's sort of where I've been directed with my career. I do miss, you know, you don't have, you know, graduate students, so you sort of miss that innovative research that's kind of just anywhere, you know, it can be all over the place. You know, ours is much more, like I said, narrow spectrum, but it's just very fulfilling for me doing what I do and being able to be out in the field and spend my days out in the field, you know, from an agricultural and research setting. So it kind of really depends on your personality, and there's a benefits and disadvantages. I think at the end of the day, it's important to find something that you are passionate about and that you love to do. And I always even tell my kids this, you find something that you love to do and you'll never work a day in your life. And I think that applies, what career path you take. If there's a certain aspect of your research program that really motivates you and drives you, and, try to pick a career, I guess, where you get to spend the majority of your time there. There's never going to be 100% of happiness. There's certain aspects of my job that I don't like, of course, but the majority of it I really do thoroughly enjoy. And so I think that there's obviously distinct differences between academia. And I think as I see with these academic positions coming up, there's a lot more ask for academic professors in terms of job requirements. It's not just research and extension. They want you to teach, they want graduate students, they want publication. So I see more pressure on that end and being able to deliver all those things. And I think it's difficult. I don't envy people in those positions, because I think it's like walking on water. I think it's some of the ask for them. So I think that's something to keep in mind as you choose your career path, but it's really what drives you and what your passion is.
Yeah, I think that's true. I've had several colleagues go back and forth, go from university to industry and back, or vice versa. And, it really is a personality thing. People, they don't work in universities if they work well in industry a lot of times, because it's just a different mindset. So.
I got one more question for you guys. So is there a separation between the people who are responsible for, like, let's say the first test that you do on a pesticide or a fungicide or an insecticide in the field versus those who then apply it to the farms with the farmers themselves? Or would you be like one person who does the first trial and then you basically take that one insecticide, like you were saying, Erin, that it takes like between 5 to 10 years or whatever to actually have it released, and you follow that same insecticide and you're the one responsible for going through all the steps until it becomes the applied process in an agricultural setting?
That depends, I think, on where you are. So at Certus, we have a lot broader range of responsibility in our roles. So I get the numbered compound, we go and figure out kind of what it does. And like I said, after it goes to market, I'm still supporting it. I have to make a lot of the sort of product development manager kind of decisions, right? Which way do we go with this product? What does the data tell us this product really does for us? Where, Erin, I think that's what I alluded to earlier. You guys have a little bit more, well, you have a lot more people than we do. So you're able to spread the roles around a bit.
Yeah, we still do shepherd it through. So, I mean, we have chemists that are obviously screening these in the lab. So I'm not doing that portion of it. But once we identify something, through laboratory and greenhouse studies that looks promising, then we transition to the field. So I am involved in those early stage studies, and we do pretty much shepherd it through the registration process. I mean, when I was hired, I started in 2008, and we were looking at a herbicide then that came to market in probably 2018. So I had looked at it for that period of time, and it's still commercially on the market. So it's sort of like, it's like a baby, you're bringing it to, market and raising it in some ways. So there is a lot of connection and hands-on, seeing something from the very beginning and then come to fruition and be sold and marketed, and growers recognize it and use it and are aware of what it's called. So that's fulfilling in some ways.
Yeah.
Right, I got a question directed towards you now. It's just me talking. So you mentioned that you worked in academia for 3 years at the University of Delaware, correct? Mm-hmm. And then you switched back to industry. What was it that made you switch back?
I didn't actually switch back. Rick went back and forth. I switched to industry because I was on soft money. It was coming to an end, and DuPont offered to double my salary, and I was like, sure. In the end, though, I think that job at the university is the job that made me want this job, right? Because I wasn't at a professor level. I was doing field research and bringing stuff back and doing lab research and consolidating data and going back to our industry sponsors and talking to them about it. And I realized that's what I really like to do, right? But I mean, obviously, again, at that level of work, the industry seems to offer a better opportunity for income, certainly, I don't think that's true I don't think that's true as you move along. I was on soft money, so it was, not well funded, if you will.
Would you say that a lot of your work is in the field setting? Because I know you worked in the field because I've seen you in the field before. Right. But Erin does most of her work in the field. So is yours kind of split? Do you do most of it in the field, or do you do most of it inside, or is it?
So yeah, that's a good question. So when I was at DuPont, like Erin, I had my own field research right? I had my own plots, all my own work, plus I work with university cooperators. At Certus, we have a lot bigger territories than Erin does. And we also work mostly in specialty markets, which it's a little bit harder to manage field trials and specialty markets with a large territory because you've got to be there all the time. You work in grapes. You can't walk away for 3 weeks because you're out in Michigan doing other work. You've got to be there. So we mostly work with COIs, so centers of influence, we call them. So universities or private contractors do our actual field research. And I'm not going to lie to you, I miss that. I miss being out there in my Tyvek, getting dirty and all that. So you could see that this summer when I was, working with you guys. That's a happy place for me. Yeah. But, and I think Erin probably is just like me. We work all summer outside and then we come in and we sit at our desk for a while, sort of synthesizing data, and that part's fun. And then, it's a pretty broad range of things that we do. Obviously, we are very seasonal here in the Northeast, as opposed to my colleagues in California and Florida, which they pretty much never stop. So I guess there's some good variety. I don't know.
Are you guys responsible for synthesizing all your own data, or do you move it to the next person? How important is the statistics in industry?
Oh,
Don't laugh, Ann.
I used to have a guy for that.
See?
Statistics are important all of the time, Kasha. All the time.
Erin, do you want to talk
have
about
questions? So, Kasha, you are fired.
Yeah, I mean, I do my own analysis, but if there's a lot of times, and especially it seems to be more of a common approach, we like to do larger, big data pools and analysis. It depends on, that's very easy to do, like in a herbicide and weed science aspect, where we pull all the data across the US and analyze it in that fashion. So we do have data analysts that help us with that. But then I also, all my own personal research trials, I will do myself. But if it's a larger kind of one-off, we have some, unusual statistical designs where we do have people to assist us and help us. So that's very much appreciated.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.
I'll let someone else have a turn.
I have a question for Erin. I'm considering going to Virginia Tech for grad school. And so how would you say that your experience there helped you prepare for your industry job?
It was great. It's a great school, a great entomology department. I worked with Tom Kuhar, and he does a lot of industry related research, but he also, Tom's got a large crew. He usually probably has at least 10 students he's either a major professor or working jointly with someone else in a department. And so that was a really great experience because he really tries to incorporate or include everyone and everyone else's research. So I helped all the other students in our program do their research. And I think for me, it was a very educational experience because I got to learn about their research projects and expand my level of knowledge on other things. So I really enjoyed it. It was kind of a unique position because Tom was on the Eastern Shore then, which is about 5 hours from campus. So I was on the main campus during the academic year taking classes. And then I spent my summers out on the Eastern Shore doing my research there. So it was kind of an interesting way to see kind of both sides of a research facility, farm, as well as the main campus. So I think, depending on where your interest lies, I think maybe, Tom's program is still very diverse. He does a variety of research, obviously a lot of applied research, but then all other types of research. It's kind of endless. So it was working with him was a great experience. So I think maybe, whoever your major professor is, and even if you're a major professor, there's still opportunities to spend other time with other graduate students and see what they're doing and see what their program is about. And I think that's something that I would encourage to take the opportunity to do if you do have the ability to do that.
Thank you.
One more question.
Are there any other questions from the students specific or faculty?
Well, maybe I can ask a question, Erin. So I remember that, say, you only cover, say, a small area, like in the US, and you have counterparts within your company. I guess you compete with each other in getting the research, funds. Do you really propose certain research projects within your company?
So, I mean, basically, as a company in North America, we develop research protocols, and basically that's usually around the commodities in that area. I know if we have, an apple insect trial, we're probably going to conduct trials in Washington, Michigan, New York, and probably in the Mid-Atlantic region. So that's sort of how we try to do it. We try to cover all the geographies that are key producers for that particular commodity. So I wouldn't say it's so much competing. We have a pot of money that we're distributing amongst those regions. And so it's really based on what is grown in that area and the priority of that crop in that area.
All right, thanks. I think it's already 12. We can finish here. For those registered for the class, we can continue. Thank you, everybody, for your seminar. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We'll have a 5 minutes break. So after maybe 12:06, you can come back. All right.